Anna's daring escape, a laboratory nightmare, and an impossible reunion in Port Charles. The sophisticated WASB operative turns the tables on her captors and brings shocking news home. The gleaming laboratory doors hissed open one final time for Commissioner Anna Dex. Weeks of captivity, manipulation, and psychological warfare had hardened her resolve into something unbreakable. She had been a spy for decades, trained to think under pressure, to observe every detail, and to never surrender. Her captor, Pascal, believed her broken by now, docile from the sedatives, compliant from the isolation. He was wrong. Anna's fingers worked methodically at the lock on her cell door, employing skills she had perfected during her years in the field. Years of fieldwork had etched these techniques into her muscle memory, and no amount of confinement could erase them. The mechanism clicked, the door swung open. For a moment, she stood in the sterile corridor, breathing in the recycled air of the laboratory, listening to the hum of equipment that had become the soundtrack to her nightmare. The walk down the corridor felt eternal. Somewhere in this facility, there were others prisoners like her, trapped behind reinforced doors. Anna's mind had shifted from survival to liberation. If she was getting out, she would not leave them behind. The face behind the cruelty. When Pascal had first entered her cell weeks ago, Anna had sensed immediately that this was no faceless operative. He was someone who wanted her to know he was there, who derived satisfaction from her distress. He would mock her with theatrical cruelty, pacing before her like a predator savoring its prey. "You know, Commissioner," he had sneered one afternoon, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your reputation precedes you. The great Anna Dex, spy extraordinaire. And here you are, chained to a chair like a common criminal." Anna had merely stared at him, refusing to give him the reaction he craved. Every word, every taunt was information. She catalogued his mannerisms, his patterns, the exact timing of his visits. She learned when he grew bored, when his attention wandered, when the security became lax. That knowledge was now her salvation. Unlocking the impossible. As Anna moved through the corridors, using her lockpicking skills to open doors one by one, she discovered the facility's dark secret. Room after room revealed imprisoned souls, subconscious and terrified. Others sedated beyond awareness. This was no ordinary laboratory. This was a prison designed to extract humanity and replace it with something else entirely. The equipment she saw, strains, intravenous drips, neural monitoring devices, spoke of experiments far darker than she had imagined. "Come on," she whispered urgently to one woman who stirred as Anna released her. "We're leaving now." But it was when Anna reached a particularly isolated chamber that her breath caught. There, on a medical bed, lay a young man she had thought dead. Dex Heller, Sonny's proish, Josslyn's beloved, the officer who had turned away from the mob to build a better life. The same Dex who poor Charles had mourned just months ago. His eyes opened as she approached, confused and barely conscious. "Anna," his voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Am I dreaming?" "No, sweetheart. You're alive and we're getting out of here," Anna said, her voice steady despite the shock coursing through her veins. "Can you move?" Dex struggled to sit up, his body weak from weeks of captivity and whatever experiments they had subjected him to. Anna helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as alarms began to blare throughout the facility. "They're going to come," Dex warned, his mind clearing slightly. "They'll try to stop us." "Let them try," Anna replied, her jaw set with determination. She had survived worse than Pascal and whatever operation he represented. She would not fail now. Not with Dex alive and others counting on her, the desperate flight. The escape through the laboratory became a race against time. Anna moved with the precision of the elite operative she had always been, guiding Dex through corridors and past security cameras she had memorized. When guards appeared, she used her combat skills with lethal efficiency. There was no hesitation, no mercy, only the singular focus of a woman fighting for freedom. Alarms wailed through the facility as Anna and Dex pushed through a reinforced door into the fresh night air. The cool wind hit her face like a baptism. For the first time in weeks, she breathed freely. Getting back to Port Charles was the final challenge. Anna knew she could not risk going to the police or the hospital if Pascal and his employers had the resources to kidnap a WASB agent. They certainly had resources within Port Charles's institutions. Instead, she made her way to the one person she knew could handle the truth. Sonny Corinthos. The return that changes everything. When Anna finally stood before Sonny, Dex at her side, alive and breathing, the mob boss nearly collapsed from the shock. Anna, Sonny breathed, stepping forward. His eyes were wide, disbelieving. We thought, what happened? And Dex, how is this possible? Josslyn, we had a funeral. We need to talk, Anna said quietly. And we need to do it without alerting anyone else. Not yet. There's something you need to know. Something that changes everything we thought we understood about what happened to us. Word spread through Port Charles like wildfire. Josslyn received the call from Sonny himself. She raced to find her beloved Dex alive, standing with Anna in a safe house. The reunion was emotional, overwhelming, a moment of profound joy mixed with profound confusion. How? Josslyn demanded, tears streaming down her face. We buried you. I felt like I had lost everything. I know, Dex said softly, pulling her close. I don't know what they were doing to me in that place. Why they faked my death or what they wanted, but Anna got us out. Anna risked everything. The larger conspiracy. As Port Charles struggled to process the impossible that one of their own had risen from the dead, Anna began revealing the deeper truth. The laboratory was not an isolated operation. It was connected to something larger, something that reached back into her past and into the very foundations of the agencies meant to protect the city. We need to be careful, Anna warned Sonny, her eyes grave. Whoever orchestrated this has power. They have resources, and if they could do this to me, to Dex, they can do it to anyone. The mystery of who had been pulling the strings, who had authorized her kidnapping, who had ordered Dex's capture, and what purpose that facility truly served remained unanswered. But for the first time since her abduction, Anna was no longer a prisoner. She was back where she belonged, in Port Charles, ready to uncover every truth, no matter how dangerous. The resurrection of Dexler and the return of Anna Dean marked a turning point in Port Charles history. What had seemed like a closed chapter had been ripped wide open, revealing mysteries far more complex and dangerous than anyone had dared imagine. Next, we will learn about the complex romantic situation surrounding one of Port Charles' most fascinating and enigmatic characters. The topic of love and relationships in Port Charles has always been a central theme that captivates viewers. And today, we're diving deep into the romantic prospects and potential future partnerships for the stunning and dangerous Ava Jerome. This powerhouse character has captured audience attention for years with her scheming ways, her fierce maternal instincts, and her undeniable magnetism that draws men into her orbit like moths to a flame. Ava's recent romantic entanglements. When we examine Ava's recent romantic history, two names immediately spring to mind, each representing very different aspects of what Ava seeks in male companionship. The first is the cunning attorney Rick Lansing. A man who shares many of AA's morally flexible qualities and understands the darker corners of Port Charles society. The second is the ruggedly handsome, stable-hand Cody Bell, who provided a physical distraction and served a strategic purpose in Ava's ongoing chess game of relationships. These two men represent the dual nature of Ava's approach to romance, combining both calculated strategic thinking with raw physical attraction and impulsive decision-making. The relationship between Ava and Rick Lansing has been particularly fascinating to dissect because it reveals so much about both characters' psychological makeup and emotional availability. When we really analyze what was happening between these two, it becomes increasingly clear that genuine love was never truly the foundation of their connection. Instead, what existed was a powerful chemistry born from shared experiences in the legal world, mutual understanding of moral ambiguity, and an appreciation for each other's sharp intellect and cunning nature. Ava developed what could best be described as an intense infatuation with her attorney, mistaking the thrill of their verbal sparring and scheming collaboration for something deeper and more meaningful. The competitive element of Ava's attraction to Rick cannot be overstated and reveals fundamental truths about her personality. Ava is a woman who thrives on winning, on being chosen, on proving that she's superior to her rivals in every conceivable way. When she discovered that Rick harbored lingering feelings for the ever-virtuous Elizabeth Weber, something primal was triggered within Ava's psyche. Suddenly, the relationship became less about genuine emotional connection and more about defeating Elizabeth in a competition that Elizabeth didn't even know she was participating in. Ava wanted to prove that she, with all her dangerous allure and sophisticated worldliness, could captivate Rick more completely than the wholesome, good-hearted nurse ever could. This competitive streak runs deep in Ava's character, influencing many of her decisions and actions throughout her time in Port Charles. From Rick's perspective, the situation was equally lacking in genuine romantic depth and long-term potential. His preference has always been clear: he would choose Elizabeth Weber if given the opportunity. Elizabeth represents something that Rick finds himself drawn to repeatedly despite his own morally questionable actions and choices. However, when Elizabeth firmly rejected his advances and made it clear she wasn't interested in rekindling their complicated history, Rick found himself seeking comfort and companionship elsewhere. Ava provided that alternative, offering not just physical attraction and sexual chemistry, but also a steady source of legal income through her various legal troubles and questionable business dealings. Their partnership evolved into something transactional, with blackmail schemes and legal maneuvering replacing genuine emotional intimacy. Once Ava's financial resources dried up, the foundation of their relationship crumbled, exposing the hollow core that had existed all along: the Cody Bell distraction. The brief entanglement with Cody Bell represents an entirely different category of relationship for Ava. This wasn't about emotional connection, strategic partnership, or even genuine physical attraction that went beyond surface-level appeal. Cody served primarily as a tool in Ava's arsenal, a handsome distraction deployed specifically to provoke jealousy in Rick and manipulate the emotional dynamics of her complicated situation. The entire affair was wrapped up in the Christina Corinthos Davis scheme, demonstrating how Ava's romantic choices are often influenced by larger strategic considerations and family complications. There was never any realistic scenario where Cody and Ava would develop into something meaningful or lasting. He was essentially a pawn in a much larger game that Ava was playing. Ava's pattern of extreme romantic choices. When we step back and examine Ava's complete romantic history throughout her time in Port Charles, a fascinating pattern emerges that reveals deep psychological truths about her character and what she seeks in partnerships. Ava doesn't do middle ground. She doesn't choose average, stable, moderately decent men who would provide a calm, predictable relationship. Instead, Ava gravitates toward extremes, swinging dramatically between dangerous villains who match her morally questionable nature and exceptionally good, virtuous men who represent everything she's not. This pattern suggests an internal conflict within Ava herself, a woman torn between embracing her darker impulses and seeking redemption through association with goodness. The relationship with Franco Baldwin during his darkest days as a disturbed killer represents one extreme of this pattern. Ava was drawn to Franco when he was at his most dangerous and unpredictable, when his psychotic tendencies were still very much active and threatening. There was an undeniable chemistry between them that thrived on danger, darkness, and the thrill of being with someone who truly understood the capacity for violence and moral transgression. This wasn't a relationship built on stability or conventional romantic ideals, but rather on a mutual recognition of each other's capacity for darkness and destruction. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Ava's relationship with the genuinely decent Dr. Griffin Monroe, a man who represented moral integrity, spiritual depth, and authentic goodness. Griffin seemed like he might be able to reach something better within Ava to pull her toward the light and help her become a better version of herself. However, the fundamental incompatibility became apparent when Griffin couldn't reconcile Ava's bad girl antics and morally questionable choices with his own values and principles. The situation became even more complicated and painful when Griffin began a relationship with Ava's daughter, Kiki Jerome, creating a devastating betrayal that cut Ava deeply and reinforced her belief that good men ultimately can't handle who she really is. Perhaps the most psychologically damaging of Ava's romantic experiences was the situation with Dr. Kevin Collins and his psychopathic twin brother, Ryan Chamberlain. Ava believed she was developing genuine feelings for the kind, understanding psychiatrist Kevin Collins, opening herself up emotionally in ways she rarely allows. However, the horrifying truth was that she had actually been intimate with Ryan Chamberlain, Kevin's dangerous and murderous twin, who had been masquerading as his brother. This experience would traumatize anyone, but for Ava, it reinforced the darkest beliefs she holds about herself and her inability to find genuine safe love. The psychological impact of believing you're falling for one man while actually being manipulated by his evil twin cannot be overstated. Current prospects and dangerous possibilities. Looking at the current landscape of available men in Port Charles, the situation becomes both intriguing and concerning for those who care about Ava's well-being and safety. The most immediate and dangerous prospect is Jen Sidwell, the mysterious and undeniably charismatic newcomer who has been engaging in increasingly flirtatious behavior with Ava since arriving in town. Their initial interactions began out of Ava's desperate financial situation as she attempted to sell him expensive artwork to generate income during her cash-strapped period. However, something shifted as their interactions continued, with Sidwell's charm and dangerous appeal genuinely affecting Ava beyond mere transactional necessity. The connection between Ava and Sidwell is complicated by their mutual associations with Lucas Jones and Marco Rios, creating layers of complexity in their dynamic. However, the most crucial and dangerous element is Sidwell's true interest in Ava, which stems primarily from her deep connection to Sonny Corinthos through their shared daughter, Avery Corinthos. This makes Ava a valuable asset in whatever schemes and power plays Sidwell has planned for Port Charles and its criminal underworld. The idea of Ava becoming romantically involved with Sidwell is deeply troubling for several reasons. First and foremost, Sidwell has demonstrated that he's the type of man who would eliminate Ava without hesitation if she became inconvenient or if her death would serve his larger purposes. He's dangerous in a way that transcends normal Port Charles danger, bringing an international criminal element that doesn't play by the local rules. Additionally, a romantic relationship between Ava and Sidwell would create catastrophic complications with Sonny Corinthos. Despite their complicated history and ongoing conflicts, Sonny and Ava have managed to maintain a functional co-parenting relationship for Avery's sake. If Ava became involved with someone Sonny views as a direct threat to his organization and family, he would absolutely attempt to restrict Ava's access to their daughter. Port Charles has witnessed too many painful custody battles between Sonny and Ava over the years, with Avery caught in the middle of her parents' conflicts. Another custody war would be devastating for everyone involved, particularly the young girl who deserves stability and peace. The Nathan West wild card. The most intriguing and potentially explosive romantic possibility for Ava involves the recently returned Nathan West. But here's where things get truly fascinating and potentially disturbing. There's substantial reason to believe that the man walking around Port Charles claiming to be Nathan West isn't actually Nathan at all. Instead, there may be someone else inhabiting that body, wearing Nathan's face like an elaborate mask, deceiving everyone who knew and loved the original Nathan. This scenario opens up incredibly dark and twisted possibilities that would be perfectly suited to AA's complicated romantic history. Imagine the dramatic potential of Ava being drawn to who she believes is the honorable, good-hearted police detective Nathan West. She might see him as another chance at redemption through association with a genuinely good man. Similar to her attempt with Griffin Monroe, the attraction could develop gradually, with Ava convinced she's finally making a healthy romantic choice by pursuing someone stable, decent, and morally upright. However, the devastating reveal would come when it's exposed that Nathan's face and body are actually being controlled by someone far more sinister and dangerous. The possibilities for who might actually be behind Nathan's facade are truly chilling. It could be Caesar Faison, the notorious villain whose obsession with Anna Dex and capacity for elaborate schemes made him one of Port Charles' most dangerous residents. Faison's history of psychological manipulation and complex plots would make him capable of such an elaborate deception. Alternatively, the person behind Nathan's face could be Peter August, Faison's troubled son, who has his own complicated history with deception and violence. Either reveal would devastate Ava and create a horrifying parallel to her experience with Kevin Collins and Ryan Chamberlain. This scenario would represent a cruel repetition of one of Ava's most traumatic experiences, forcing her to confront once again that she was intimate with and developing feelings for someone who was deceiving her at the most fundamental level. The psychological impact would be enormous, potentially pushing Ava further into darkness and reinforcing her belief that she's fundamentally incapable of finding genuine safe love. However, it would also create incredibly compelling television, giving actress Moral West the opportunity to explore the complex emotional landscape of betrayal, rage, and heartbreak that she portrays so brilliantly. The question of who Ava Jerome should be with romantically is complex and doesn't have any easy answers. What's clear is that this fierce, complicated, dangerous, and ultimately vulnerable woman deserves a relationship that challenges her, respects her complexity, and doesn't reduce her to merely a plot device or strategic asset. Whether that relationship is with someone currently in Port Charles or a yet-to-be-introduced character remains to be seen, but viewers will undoubtedly be watching with fascination as Ava's romantic journey continues to unfold. Music.